2. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Your Life, Your Voice. Welcome to my co-host, Lisa Michelish. Hi, Lisa. How are you?
I'm okay. How are you?
Good, thank you. And today we have a guest speaker who is from Deakin University, who has a background in speech pathology. So welcome, Joanne Watson.
Hello, everyone. Lovely to be here.
Likewise. Thank you. I'll just close my door because something's happening outside. So I apologise for that.
Very 2020, isn't it?
So 2020 has posed lots of challenges, as we all know. So hopefully we are out of that now. So I'll just start with acknowledgement of country to country. I'll just get that up. So D&D would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we work and live, and recognise the continuing connection to land, water and community. And D&D would also like to pay respects to all our Indigenous brothers and sisters who have a disability, and we would also like to acknowledge the mortality rate of our Indigenous brothers and sisters, which is about a decade lower than the Western society. We call for greater outcomes with our Indigenous friends. So we have some questions for Jo Watson. So we'll just start with that. So Jo, can you tell us a little bit about your life?
A little bit about my life. Wow, that's a good question. Just a little bit. I could go on forever. Well, I'm in my 51st year. Wow, I turned 50 this year. And it's been a great life so far, I guess. In terms of my experience of disability, I don't live with a disability, but I grew up with my sister, Catherine, who has an intellectual disability, and she's also legally blind. And later in life, my mum had a spinal cord injury, so she has quadriplegia now. So disability support and connection, I guess, is very much a part of my life. I was born in Wangaratta, which is up the Hume Highway. I'm here in Brunswick at the moment, on Wurundjeri land. And if we go about 4 hours north that way, up the Hume Highway is Wangaratta, where I was born, and then grew up in Melbourne, out in the eastern suburbs. And I studied speech pathology once I left school, and since then have had a wonderful, been really lucky to have a wonderful career working here in Melbourne a lot, in Tasmania, in Hong Kong, China, the US, and I've travelled a lot of places beyond those places as well. So that's a little bit about me. I think that's probably enough.
What sort of work did you do in these other countries?
I worked as a speech pathologist in disability. So in Hong Kong, I had a private practice. I also worked at the Chinese University of Hong Kong, and I worked predominantly with kids and younger people with intellectual disability, and people that use AAC, so people who use augmentative and alternative communication, or who have complex communication support needs. So that was in Hong Kong. And then in the US, in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, I worked there for 5 years at the university, or Temple University, and my role there was specifically around augmentative communication and assistive technology. So I ran a statewide assistive technology library where people could borrow all kinds of wonderful equipment and technology to try out, because as we know, assistive technology is a really expensive thing for many people with disability. And so this was an opportunity for people to try things out and work out what it was that they needed. But I also did a lot of teaching at Temple University around speech pathology, and I also practiced and worked with people with who needed augmentative and alternative communication.
Yeah, so I'm going to go a bit off script at the moment.
Yeah.
With all the work that you've done with in the area of speech pathology, I suppose you've seen lots of changes, and I suppose you sort of like being a trailblazer in changes. Is that a fair enough statement?
I wouldn't call myself a trailblazer. I would call the people that I've supported the trailblazers, really. It's a really good question, Julie. And I think it's particularly in the area of augmentative communication. Many of my friends who are similar age to me or older, who I've known for many, many years, I've watched their progression, I guess, in terms of their ability to communicate what it is that they need and want in their life to have a good life. And technology has really helped with that. When I think back to my life as a child and supporting my sister, when I think about communication, there really wasn't a lot. If you didn't use speech to communicate at that time, life could be very, very difficult. And we didn't have a lot of technologies. We had some very basic technologies like the Canon communicator. Many of you will remember that. But now skipping forward to 2000 and where are we? 2020. How could I ever forget this year? The options for people who don't use speech to communicate are so incredible. So we have people who use their eyes to access keyboards, on-screen keyboards, to be able to spell out what they want to say, or even a thing called a cyber mouse, which is where somehow I don't know all the techie ins and outs of it, but people can think where they want the cursor to go, and that allows them to be able to speak. So if you've got no other movement, there is really some fantastic technologies and supports for people.
Yeah, I saw on media the eye gazing technique is rather new. And I think that they put in some sort of electrode in your brain that actually enables the person to think. Like if they want to move their left foot, and they just think about it and it happens. It's
quite amazing. Yeah.
Amazing.
So amazing. And my interest has obviously been around communication, but, in terms of my mum, who has quadriplegia, so she's paralysed from the neck down, these kinds of technologies are game changers for young people or for anyone with spinal cord injury. And as we move on, technology can sometimes be scary and problematic, but there's also some fantastic, it creates a fantastic future for many people with disability.
Yeah, as you know, diversity disability are in the COLD population, and COLD, for our viewers, it just means people from other countries. So, and there are barriers associated with that, language and understanding and rights and all these things. And I'm just talking from a personal perspective.
Yeah.
there seems to be, and I'm sure it's improving, but there seems to be a lack of understanding within the whole community of what their child, or if they have a disability, what they can like, what sort of things are out there to assist their loved ones or themselves in the process. So we would encourage these people to not be scared. I mean, my family were time poor for a start.
Yeah.
They're also very resistant to asking for help.
Yeah.
So, and I mean, just as well, I have had the capacity to work things out as I got older. It was sort of like, it was really difficult space to navigate in, because I am a woman, and in my family, not in every family, as a woman growing up in the cold patriarchy, which just means male domination. It was a really hard space to navigate. So anyway, and if I wanted to do something different, other than get married and bear children, for the next generation, which I did not do. I resisted that because I didn't want to do that for a lot of reasons. But I didn't want to go down that path, and my path was a little bit different to the normal migrant female child. Anyway, so I chose education and upward mobility as something I wanted to achieve.
Yeah.
So that was really frowned upon.
Yes.
From family, because because of the male domination, because of I had very little rights in my family. So and like, I'm quite a low level, so I had more health issues than anything else. So I've been educated in the mainstream system, and even the education system, Joe, back in the early 80s, it was really against me. And luckily I had the foresight to just like say, like, this is like within myself, because as a 50-year-old migrant child, I felt like I had no power. And I just had to have that courage to think, yeah, this is not on. Like, you guys may be educators, but you have no idea the home situation, the holistic person, and what they actually have gone through life.
Yeah.
And quite honestly, my health issues were quite severe, in the fact that I had I was always quite tired, because my family background we had a really thriving business, which was very physical. It was very physical. I just couldn't cope. I really couldn't cope with that environment.
Yeah.
I was by no means lazy, as my father pointed out to the educators, and I wasn't. If he sort of like really looked at what I did and how much I did, I was not lazy. I was just really physically unfit to deal with the demands of that sort of like environment.
Yeah.
I really had to fight to figure out a way how to support myself, how to support my health needs, because there wasn't really any money for my health needs to be supported. So then I had to figure out that side of things. And this is while I was like finishing school, trying to figure out a career path. And I did have a career path. I went into computing. So I was a computer operator for the public service. I did a TAFE certificate, when I was questioned in my early years of education, I was the last one to ask about what I wanted to do, which is a rather interesting thing, because it was my life that I was talking about. So, I just told them what I was going to do. It was really frowned upon by educators.
Yeah.
Maybe from a cultural perspective, I can understand my family attitudes. But from an educator's point of view, the attitude was really frowned upon.
Yeah.
And I don't know where it came from, because my grades weren't that bad. So I just looked at all the evidence, thinking to myself, you guys have no idea, absolutely no idea of my home environment, the expectations,
Yeah.
and what I needed to do to get out of there.
Yeah.
But I survived. I
Yeah.
survived it. I also survived a Kennett hut. I survived that too.
We all survived the Kennett years.
Yeah. So I find it really interesting that he's the head of Beyond Blue. So it's quite ironic, actually, because in his years of power, there are lots of people that went through depression and all sorts of things. Because I think 100,000 people were cut from the public service.
Yep.
At that time, and
Yep.
when I look back on it, there was a need for a bit of a cull, but that was a raw slaughter.
It certainly was, wasn't it? One of the things I've been thinking about, Julie, as you've been talking, is, I'm not sure if I mentioned before, but I run the postgraduate program in disability and inclusion at Deakin University. And one of the concepts that we really ask our students to understand is exactly what you just described about your life as a woman with disability from a cold community. And that is this concept of intersectionality. So this idea that we all, some of us more than others, are disadvantaged because of some of our identities, whether that be because you're a woman, you come from a cold community, so you're already, English may not be your family's first language, and then you have a disability. So for you, you're describing those multiple disadvantages that come together to make life somewhat challenging. But there's also some really positives about your life, in that you are very self-determined, you're an autonomous woman, you are able to fight for yourself. But those multiple intersections, I guess, it's something that we need to consider. And you said it so beautifully before when you were talking about wanting those educators to understand that you are not just Julie with a disability. You are Julie with a disability from a cold background, and you have your own challenges. You have all of these other identities, I guess, that come together to make you who you are. And I think that hopefully what we're wanting is the educators and the disability sector, those working in the disability sector moving forward, and what we're trying to educate them around is acknowledging that someone isn't just a person with a disability. They are a person who might be a mother, who might be, might have a rich cultural background like you, who may have a very busy family life, who's got the business going and all of that, that we are, all of us, are whole people. And I think from what you're describing, when we think about the 70s and 80s, perhaps we're similar in our growing up, that what we saw, particularly in disability, was that there was just a very singular focus on people with disability. That's well, you were your disability. So those other parts of your life were not acknowledged. And as people from cold communities, you've got so much to offer more than your disability. You know, the richness of the culture that so many of our cultures bring to this, if we're in Melbourne, so that bring to this town, that bring to Melbourne, makes us who we are. And I think that's something that we really need to start thinking about more and more. So, Julie, thank you for articulating that so beautifully, because you just nailed it, I think.
Oh, that's great. We like, yeah, I noticed that some of the questions you've already answered. So, and sometimes, you know, things come up in these interviews and we just run with it. So,
yeah,
thanks for that. Thanks for, you know, being flexible. Anyway, so let's see what we can say. I think we've covered this a little bit, but so what changes have you seen in this sector that has made a huge difference?
We have covered it a little bit, but I also wanted to talk about something that you talked about as well. I think your life story is a really great one, because you can map out, you know, see those changes in the sector and understanding through time. But I think one of the really clear changes that we've seen is this idea of self-determination, of autonomy, of supporting people to live lives of their choice. You know, what makes a good life for me is going to be maybe different to what makes a good life for Lisa or you, Julie. It's we all have a right. We all have a human right under the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities to be able to live that life in the way that we want to. And so if we look at the self-determination movement that probably started within disability around the 70s, 80s, we can see that evolution of how, you know, people became, but in the 70s, we started to think about deinstitutionalization and what that meant. And that was a big start and a big catalyst, I think. That independent living movement was a catalyst for people being able to start exploring how they can live that autonomous life. And now here in 2020, after we signed and ratified the convention, the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, in 2008, Australia ratified that. So we have an unequivocal obligation to make sure these things happen. We aren't necessarily doing a great job of it, but I think that we've come a long, long way. And if we look at the specific articles of the convention, particularly Article 12, which talks about this right to autonomy, we can use that as an instrument to change policy and to change practice. So I think that that's probably, for me, the biggest change that I've seen in my time is this idea that self-determination is for every human being, regardless of your ability or your physical ability or your cognitive disability even. So I think that we're starting to really challenge some of those things, and we've got a really great committee, the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities Committee. We have Rosemary KS, our very own Rosemary KS, on that committee. And so I think things are moving fairly rapidly at the moment, and we need to keep going. I think that there's some real momentum around this idea of universal autonomy.
Yes, so you spoke about the right to live independently and institutionalization that happened in the really early years, 40s and 50s. But there are people that are in sub-advocacy groups that I am networking with who have been through those sort of like institutions, and you know, and they were out there, in their wheelchairs, advocating for change and doing blockades and that sort of thing going on. And I want to sort of like educate people on sort of like having the courage to chip away, because with government policy and the social fabric of society, these things take time and effort and resources and guts and courage, and so these people now live freely in whichever way they see fit. But and so what I'd like to say to people out there is that don't feel discouraged. Have the courage to speak out. There are things said about people that are on the left side of the spectrum, and people are like sometimes they are bullied and vilified for being on the left spectrum, and I think that's really interesting. I think to look at, and I think there are arguments on both sides, and I tend to look at all the arguments, and we're on the side of social, a better social society, because when you look at like past and the present and the future, and what people can contribute, like you said, Joe, from their culture, their upbringing, the Indigenous brothers and sisters, their knowledge of the land, the flora, the fauna, and the healing capacities of these sort of like different things that they've been privy to for thousands of years. And I really sort of like have to say that my actual I wouldn't say recovery, but ongoing health improvements, because this is what it is with a lot of people. It's all about maintaining your health and moving forward. With a lot of health issues, there are no real answers. So I still have to look at both natural remedies and a holistic approach to life, without discounting the medical advice. Yeah, so I still like play both sides of the spectrum. But the negative attitudes with medical health providers are just really quite extraordinary, because when I'm challenged, I still like point out to these people, how many times have you guys basically, nearly killed me? And this is like literally nearly killed me.
Yeah.
And some of it was medical malpractice, which I didn't really pursue. Other things were like really simple things, like the reason why I was falling over a lot was because I had a collapsed left heel. Now, why couldn't that be picked up by the general health practitioners? So I basically was falling over a lot, up until I was 27. When I went to see a kinesiologist for my first appointment, and they pointed out a lot of things that I was like dealing with. And so also the most disturbing thing was my cranials was sort of like in a position where indicated where I had suicidal thoughts. I can confirm that was the case. Not only did I have family type of issues I had to deal with, I also had other things I had to deal with that the general practitioners of the medical profession could not even diagnose, let alone find treatments for. So lots of examples
Yeah,
along these lines.
yeah, yeah.
So
And I think what one of the things that you're describing again there, Julie, is this access to the health system for people with disability is increasingly being recognised. So that's another change I've seen as an issue. And I think one of the reasons it's an issue is that often a medical practitioner will see your disability first. And they'll just say, oh, she's falling over because of her disability, not she's falling over because there might be something else wrong. Maybe she's got some heart issues, or maybe, it's this idea of what is sometimes called overshadowing. So all they see is the disability. They don't see that as a human, you might have diabetes, or you might have mental health issues, or you might have so many other things. So all of those things are not seen as important because all they see is your disability. And I think that that's really an important thing that we need to push to as well into the future. And people are more than their disability.
well, yeah, I mean, the last time they tried to kill me was in 2014. So, I was pretty quite unwell, and finally, after the help of my medical advocate, I live alone. I live alone. I don't have any family support, but I have great friends. So I still phoned up my medical advocate. I've been quite unwell for quite a while, and my doctor keeps on sending me home, and without anything,
Yeah.
any treatments. And the last time I went to this particular GP, my advocate saw how ill I was, because I'm not I'm slight on the side of not crying wolf. So so when I do actually reach out, there's all there's a good reason why
Yeah.
I have to reach out, and it's usually because I'm being ignored, and not being treated the way I should be treated, with a person with health issues that need to be sorted out. That doesn't cry wolf, that doesn't complain, that just tries to soldier on, And so anyway, so my medical advocate came with me to this appointment, and and um, and basically said she needs to go to hospital, because this has been going on for too long. And sure enough, I went into the emergency hospital. Then I had to convince. I had to convince the emergency doctor that I was there. I was unwell, because
Yep.
when I'm unwell, I have speech issues.
Yep.
All sorts of things happen. And look, I'm well, so that's why I'm in hospital, because I'm unwell.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, I live in an area where there's a high discrimination against people with. There's a high population of people that are drug affected. So when I presented at the ED department,
Yeah, that's what they assumed.
it was assumed I was on some sort of drugs.
Yeah.
And what I say to these people is that you could have asked me. You could have asked me.
Yeah.
He was acting very aggressively, with a tone that was really quite aggressive and quite down, just really negative and really horrible, condescending. And I had someone with me at that time, and they pulled him up, and the thing is, Joe, ask someone, like, they're the shit. I'm busy. I'm busy. What's wrong with you? Like, I'm busy. You came at the wrong time. I'm like in the days trying to figure out what is going on here. I'm not here for fun and games. Something's really happening here.
Yeah.
And anyway, so I convinced him that something was wrong. And having to convince someone when you're quite critically ill,
Yeah, that's right.
quite challenging, yeah, for anyone. So I was admitted to the ward, and pretty soon after that, it was diagnosed I had diverticulitis.
Yeah.
So, and this is a treatable condition. It was picked up quickly enough.
Yeah.
So, and even after they diagnosed me, I was still made to wait. And in that time I waited, my bowel burst. So
Yeah.
then I had to go through all this trauma, and it was quite a journey.
Yeah. So what you're describing is this need for the health sector to understand disability more, and that's something that a colleague and I, Meredith Ellen, I'm not sure if you know Meredith, she doesn't use speech to communicate. We've been doing a lot of training in it for our medical students at Deakin, which we're very proud of. We're very proud that Deakin have been able to find the room in their very tapped curriculum to see this as a priority. So what we're doing is training, and Meredith's doing most of it, where she says, when I present to the doctor or present to an emergency, just like you have described, Julie, I want you to see my health condition. I don't want you to see my disability. Can we put that aside for now and see why my blood sugar is 17 or whatever it is? Yeah, so I think that what you're, again, so beautifully articulating, Julie, is that we need a real focus on training our health professionals of the future. Yeah.
Yeah.
And people like you doing that training, Julie.
So one good thing that came out of this it was effectively 2 months in hospital, which is quite a long time. That
2 months, it is a long time.
You
got to know those nurses well, didn't you?
I did, yes. So it was different wards and like different places. So anyway, I was approached by, it must have been an educator, and she approached me and said, "Oh, would you like to would you be willing to educate some trainee doctors?"
Fantastic.
So I'm not sure what year they were in, and so at that time I had communication issues. Look, as you can appreciate, I had a condition called septicemia, that when anything bursts in your body, your blood is poisoned.
Yeah.
And I needed blood transfusions. I think I had 3 units of blood transfusions.
Goodness.
And so it took me quite a long time to be able to speak properly, and to be able to speak and to communicate. So I was very, very scratchy in my voice, and it was quite difficult to communicate. And if I couldn't say a word, I'd spell it out. And
it's the only option you were using, augmentative communication. Yay!
And the actual trainees, they were quite lovely. They were really they were really affirmative, and and I said to them, now when you become doctors and you're busy and life issues get in the way, are you going to treat someone like I was treated? Oh no, Julie, we won't. We'll never forget you. So and maybe they will, or maybe they won't. But down the road, I'm hoping that one day these people will see someone who has communication issues and won't be treated the same way I was treated. Because it was awful, and it was really awful. It was awful to be dehumanized. Person.
And I think I think what your stories are incredible, Julie, in that it's the stories, it's these stories, hearing it from the person who has experienced it, that change practice. People or students, our undergraduate students or even our postgraduate students can listen to a lecturer all they like, or someone that hasn't got that lived experience, but they need to hear it from you, because that is, that's what we know. We know that that's what changes practice.
Yes, so there's a really big shift now with lived experience. And D&D, have and other self-advocates in the sector are really full on and are really passionate about lived experience. And there's a good reason for that, because like you said, Joe, when you just read it out of a textbook, you have those cartoons, it's not really real. Like there's a human connection that has to be made. It has to be understood. I mean, I could be talking to someone's brother or someone's father or someone's mother who have grandkids and, other people who may not be able to articulate as well as I can, So, it's all about trying to break down those barriers of communication and culture and those intersectionalities that are really important bricks, building blocks in life.
Yeah, so important. And the more people hear your voice, Julie, and yours, Lisa, and I think that's where the change is going to happen.
I think so. So the NDIS, and Lisa does a lot of work in the NDIS. Don't you, Lisa?
Yeah, I do.
In this space.
Yep.
So it's all about, I think, with that space, lived experience, and it's like bringing that to the policy. Well, NDIS is the biggest policy change since Medicare. So
that's right.
It's all about that, and the voice of her colleagues in the NDIS is really crucial to changing policy or modifying the way the powers that be deal with people with disabilities and their health issues. Unfortunately, I don't qualify for the NDIS, and that seems to be the case for
many people.
10% of people on DSP qualify for the NDIS. It's quite a low percentage, I think, and because I think the actual definition of disability is quite restrictive.
Oh, definitely, isn't it?
People see, the physical side, and yes, that is a factor that requires lots of capital. But then, there are other sides of disability. There have been strides made in like autism and mental health type of.
Julie, I'll just cut in with that one. Because I work NDIA, NDIS looks at the factors, so it depends on with getting on the funding of the side of NDIS is they look at what health with it's all tested means. So if you were on an ISP before the NDIS comes in, that's how automatically you get on. But if you've never had funding in your life, you have to prove your disability. So there's a lot of hoops and stuff to get into the NDIS funding.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point, Lisa. There's so many hoops, and getting back to what you were talking about, Julie, early on in our chat, this is a lovely informal chat, I really like this, you were talking about the challenges of cold communities. When a system is really, really difficult, and perhaps English isn't your first language, or perhaps you don't have a lot of networks outside your cultural community to navigate that. The NDIA and the NDIS system must be just so difficult. And I think that we have to do a lot more work in that area to really support and provide the supports that people from cold communities need.
Actually, we have a someone from a cold background on the NDIA board, and he's really smart. So
good. Who's that, Lisa?
Dominic.
Oh, yes, fantastic. Yep. And I think it's really important that we think about these systems and how accessible they are to people, because they're not all that, you know, when you talk about the hoops that people have to jump through, Lisa, we need to make it a little bit less challenging, don't you think?
Well, that's what we're working on at the moment.
Yep.
DIA is got a lot of factors, what they've got to factor into. Not just, you can't just get on it. There has to be a lot of factors to get on the NDIS funding.
Yeah.
It's just the way they run it, because they don't want just, like, it's for people with disabilities, but they look at what type of needs you need of the support, what disability do you have, do you have the, like, when I went on it, well, because I was already on the ISP, so I was straight on it. But most people, like if you went to a private school and you never had funding in your life, you have to prove to them that you need it because of your disability. So some people don't understand, but they're getting better. That's why they've got people on NDIA boards, reference committees and stuff to help them. So it will take a while, but you have, it's a process. You have to go through the process.
That's true. Everything is a process. And I think, Julie, you said it before, it's going to take time.
So, you know, just to chime in on what Lisa has said, there are, like, and you would expect, you know, government money to have, you know, structure and all that sort of stuff, because it's taxpayers' money, so that's fine. But a big barrier for me in accessing the NDIS was that I wasn't officially diagnosed.
So that's the thing. If you're not diagnosed with a disability, you can't be on NDIS funding.
Anyway,
you need to be diagnosed.
Yes. So my actual health issue happened when I was 6 months old. To a family who had very little English skills, had a thriving business, and their priorities were, you know, different.
That's right.
They had different priorities. Coming from a war-torn country, you know, setting up a life, having 4 other children. I was the last of 5. You know, so they had other priorities. So with this child, I think speaking the third person, when this child was like, you know, 6 months old and got borrowmeningitis, you know, I look at the hospital reports in my file, and, you know, communication for my mother was extremely difficult. And I always knew it was, and I always appreciated that fact. And I always said, you know, I always used to try to comfort her and try to tell her, you know, that, you know, I will work it out, Mum, you know, it's going to take a bit of time, but I will work it out somehow. And this poor woman, you know, or when she wasn't busy at work, she had a worried look on her face, plastered on her face. And I found that really hard to deal with. You know, if I had to comfort her in searching for, like, the things that would help me, I had to comfort her in the process. And so, you know, it was really tough, you know, for her to deal with.
Yeah.
So you know, I would have been in December of, you know, 64, and you know, and so anyway, so you know, I saw the records, and I saw, you know, really average like 2-line letters, screaming for help, and it was really tough to sort of like see that, and to actually put myself in her place. And I've always had quite a big focus on empathy, and not blaming the victim, and people only do what they know, and that sort of attitude, which has helped me quite well in life.
Yeah, I can see that.
Not having the victim mentality,
yeah,
it's actually quite freeing, and I can sort of like focus on things that will be benefit to me in the wider community. Anyway, communication is tough, coming from another country, it's tough. So, and we're all in the same boat. We're all the human race. So, we all have to try and figure out things, and things happen later in life too. Like you said, Jo, your mother had a spinal cord injury. Your sister, from what I can gather, had an intellectual disability from birth. So, things happen at different stages of life. When you were creating a society of inclusion, and we're looking at the future, your future, the future of your children and your family, and creating that environment that is inclusive and that is welcoming, that people can recover and lead lives, that fulfilling lives.
Yep. And one of the things that just in this conversation, I know we haven't really stuck to script, but that's fine. It's a lovely conversation. One of the things that I was thinking about when we think about the need for a diagnosis to, an official diagnosis to qualify for the NDIS, I can understand why, but it is a challenge when you think about cold communities. For you, just in your experience, Julie, it wasn't a priority. Diagnosis was not a priority. It was getting food and on the table, and that wasn't something for your community, for your family at that time that was a priority. And we also think of our Indigenous brothers and sisters, where disability is not, there's not a word for disability in our Indigenous languages. So culturally, how does that fit within the NDIS when you can't, just because of your culture, you don't have a diagnosis? So there's these very subtle things that we need to work through that are not just, at the moment, I think our systems are very based on a colonial, white, Western approach. So we need to think outside that box when we're thinking about legislation and policy change, I think.
Maybe you need to write to the NDIA and say that to them. But I have friends who live in Northern Territory. They get things handed to them because they've got a disability.
Everyone's experience is different, isn't it?
Because they bowl with me at national level, and their government hands them bowling balls and everything and sponsors them to go to these competitions. So sometimes they don't always miss out. They actually get things handed to them. If you have a background in, see, I've got cerebral palsy and I've got an intellectual disability, epilepsy, and I've got, I am autism. Got autism as well. So I've got a mixture.
Yeah.
But if I had a background of Aboriginal, I would get everything handed to me on a platter, because I have friends who have got a background of Aboriginal and they get things handed to them on a platter. So sometimes I think they get more out of what disability than anyone else does, but that's just my opinion.
Yeah, and I think what we see there, just responding to that, Lisa, is the reason for that that perception maybe is this idea of intergenerational trauma. So we think about, so me as a colonial white person, where my ancestors came to this country, just by that fact, I'm privileged. If you start off as a culture that had been persecuted or discriminated against, things can be, you're already on the back foot. So what I like to think is I welcome any program that tries to even that out a little bit.
Yeah.
Or I welcome extra funding for cold communities or for Indigenous communities, because they haven't got the privilege that I have. Just
NDIS is working on that. The only
thing,
no one's coming forward to say, yes, we'll be a part of this. Can we help? Is it like we haven't been on the board? We've got to think of everyone.
Yeah,
and
you do.
I don't just think of me. I think of my friends who have come from overseas because their countries don't want anything to do with disabilities.
Yeah.
So I don't just think of myself. I think of my family. I think of my friends who have got all these disabilities and stuff. I've got friends who are Aboriginals and stuff. I don't have anything against them. I just want them to have the best life ever. But sometimes you got to realize as well, from my point of view, this is what I think as well. Sometimes other people don't want help.
That's right.
That's the only thing. You try to help them. Like I tried to help someone sort out a problem a couple of months ago, and they go, "Oh, we don't want your help. We can sort things out ourselves." And then you see them down the track, and they're still doing the same thing because they never got help. So
yeah,
I like to help as much as possible, because I'm, other than NDIA board, I work for Valid and stuff like that. So I'm a public speaker, so I like to help people as much as I can.
Yeah, and it's so great. It's so great that you're on the board, Lisa, and so vital. And you know, your work with Valid is terrific as well. And I think we've actually met. I think we might have met at Having a Say a few years ago, Lisa.
Maybe.
Yeah.
I don't talk that much unless it's See, because working with Valid, I'm not working with them at the moment. I'm having a break.
Yeah.
Because they've got nothing really for me to do, because we can't do anything.
Because of COVID, I know. Yeah. It's been really difficult.
So
and they've been under the pump because of the advocacy that they've needed to do while people have been in lockdown.
Because Peer Action Leader Group is so busy, and I'm meant to be doing their meetings, but I can't because I've got myself thinned out so far, because this is my last YouTube, because NDIA have just have asked me to do some more meetings all the time, so I've got to having trouble with everything. So Valid's been put on the back burner at the moment. It's just because I've got so much to do, and I don't like doing it over the line. I'm like to go in and doing it, because I'm not a person who will sit on the computer and do it unless I'm doing my graphic design work.
Yeah, and you have to look after yourself. There's only so much you can do.
Yeah.
Really important.
Well, we only have a couple of minutes left, Jo.
Oh, it feels like time flies when you're having fun, doesn't it?
Yeah, flew by. So, just to comment on what Lisa has said about what you have so well articulated about the intergenerational issues. I mean, like Lisa, the actual Aboriginal community were still considered fauna back, and that only changed, I think, in '64. So really, they weren't even considered human. So that's happened in my lifetime.
Yes, so, and that's significant.
It's absolutely, to not be recognised as human, it's just awful.
Mm.
And I've had a lesson degree on that as being a woman from a coal background who was basically considered less than human in some ways. It's really quite soul destroying. So I think that when we look at what our Indigenous community get, we have to look at it in context to their lives. And a lot of other things have happened to Indigenous people in Australia. So we can go on for another hour.
We could go for days, Julie and Lisa.
Absolute days. And so this channel is continuing next year, Joe. So we might have you back if that's okay.
I'd love to. I'd love to come back and have a chat.
And there are a few formal things I have to do. So you can hang around if you like. But Joe Watson from Deakin University, thank you for your time.
My pleasure. Lovely to meet you both.
Likewise.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
So we have to do acknowledgements, Lisa. So I'll just set that up.
All right. So we're off. We're not live anymore.
We are live.
We're still live. Yeah.
So you can hang around for our last segment, or you can leave. It's up to you, Joe.
Oh, well, I'll hang around in the background. I'll just mute myself.
Okay, sure. So share screen. Okay, so DG would like to thank the Market Resource Centre Management for their support they give to the D&D Your Life, Your Voice project. This project is funded by the Victorian DHHS and Moreland City Council, and D&D would like to thank them for providing funding to this progressive out of the box project, especially living in these times of COVID. So we acknowledge that the pandemic, COVID-19, has been difficult for people living with disabilities due to isolation, and this channel is especially for them. So we have provided some information about getting free masks, and so we'd like to restate that. So if you have, if you need to free masks, just go to your service provider, or information is provided in the DHHS website, and all you have to do is Google DHHS face mask. It should come up in your search engine. So Dee would like your ideas on guest speakers. And so we'd like to thank our guest speaker for today, Joe Watson, and please feel free on emailing us on dndyourlifeyourvoice@gmail.com. So that's the end of our session. Thank you everyone for viewing, and catch us on demand at Your Life, Your Voice, and we'll see you in 2 weeks' time. I'd like to wish Lisa the best. This is her last session on the YouTube channel. We wish her best in her endeavours, and thank her for her support on this project. Thanks, Lisa.
Thank you.